Hi, this is David Carr. I'm the creator of the RSVPMaker events plugin for WordPress. Essentially a spin-off of some projects I've been doing myself where I was running either sites where people are holding luncheons or seminars or events, or trying to organize community activities, allowing a bunch of people to post their events to a calendar. So what I've done is taken that and trying to generalize it for my own projects, make it more generally useful. It is used by people all over the world, but it is largely a one-person effort developing the code. One of the things I'm hoping to get out of this session is some more feedback, maybe some people who could help me form a little beta program too, so that I can keep track of questions that people may have. I see Scott Friedman out there, who's one of my friends from the WordPress for Toastmasters, or RSVPMaker for Toastmasters project, which is sort of an extension of this, where I built something specific to Toastmasters clubs that uses the same basic scheduling engine, and on top of that has some features specifically for Toastmasters clubs. But among the things that I've been doing in terms of updates to the software are enhancements to make it work better for that audience as well, so that when they're organizing a Toastmasters conference, it's a little bit easier for them to set up a registration form, get people signed up, and charge them from the event using the PayPal integration. So I'm hoping that some of my friends from the Toastmasters world will take advantage of those features as well. So most of this session, I'm going to be screen sharing, walking through different parts of the app, and answering questions. So I hope to make this interactive along the way. So background on me, professionally, I'm a writer and editor primarily for technology publications. So I worked with Internet World magazine back in the 90s, back when people were just figuring out what the web was. Internet World and Web Week, and then later Baseline magazine, more recently Information Week. Currently I'm off freelancing, so I'm doing both corporate work. I still do a blog for Forbes on social and collaboration technologies. I'm the author of a book, Social Collaboration for Dummies, so maybe you can run out and buy my book if you want to support me in that way. But mostly I'm trying to engage with people who are using RSVPMaker for some productive purpose and see how I can make it more productive for you. And I'm also trying to build my own credibility out in the market, maybe get referrals for some custom web development projects, other marketing projects. But let me go and show you some things. And I don't know what level of knowledge to expect. I assume you have some familiarity with WordPress. I'm not sure whether everybody on the line is already an RSVPMaker user with detailed questions, or where you're going to need to know the basics. So again, through the questions tool, you can give me feedback if I'm spending too much time on the basics, or if I'm going too fast and assuming knowledge that you don't have. So let me go back to screen sharing mode. And I need to exit the full screen. And let's go over to, this is the RSVPMaker site, which is mostly the site where the documentation is. And some of you came through and registered using this sign-up form, which is an RSVPMaker sign-up form. But I'm going to go through the process of signing up for a high-priced dinner and how we would see the payment functionality integrated there as well. So here we're going to RSVP now, which takes me to the individual event post, including the form for signing up. And because this is a dinner, we have a query on steak, chicken, or vegetarian. And we also prompt for that on behalf of the guests that a person might have. So I'll put in my wife, and I'll put her down for a steak dinner. It's fairly realistic. And I could add other guests. And my son as well. Now, I've experimented with this before. It might actually come up with other things from a previous response. But I wanted to also point out that there are a couple of options here. I can either sign up for the $100 dinner or the $150 dinner plus reception option. And that functionality is a little bit different than it was if you used RSVPMaker for events that you charged for before. You notice that user interface has changed a little bit, and I'll talk more about that. There's still some options if you want to do it the old way. So we'll submit that, and it comes back with RSVPMaker, the RSVP recorded, 3 people for dinner plus the reception at $150 each is $450. If I want to pay now, I can pay by PayPal. Click here, and this should bring me to PayPal. And this is actually live. Notice it's Cub Scout Pack 179, which I use for demos. But if we went through this process, the Cub Scout Pack would get a $450 donation. We're not going to give it to them right now, but that is my example. So I'm going to go, first I'm going to go through how this particular event was set up. And then later on in the presentation, I'm going to go through how we would add RSVPMaker to a brand new WordPress site, how we would set things up from the beginning. So I hope that's a decent plan. I'm going to look back to see if any questions have come in, and I don't see any yet. All right, so I'm going to keep going. So let's edit this event. So one of the main points of building an event scheduling system on top of RSVPMaker, building it on top of WordPress is that we can use the standard WordPress editing tools. We can lay out our event just as if it was a blog post, and we can include images, video, anything that we would include in a regular blog post. But when we scroll down past the section that is our main content, we see the options where we set the date and time of the event. We could set a duration to say that this runs for 2 hours to give people an idea of how long they're committing for. And we either do or don't collect RSVPs. So some events are just promotional. You don't necessarily need RSVPs for them. You can still use the website to market that event. But if you do want to know exactly who's coming, you check off collect RSVPs, and there are a lot of other options here. This has kind of grown over time, so maybe there's a few too many options, and I should try and simplify things. But there are a lot of options. For example, if we have a membership site, we could check login required. So only people who are already members and have a password to the website can log in and register. We can display a CAPTCHA, one of those garbled phrases that tries to keep out spam submissions. Because unfortunately, if you put anything on the web that looks like a submission form, some stupid automated robot's going to come along and try and fill in that form. And so I do get a certain number of spam submissions on every event I post. Generally, I don't actually include the CAPTCHA. I'd rather deal with the spam and make it more easier and streamlined for the user. I specify an address that the notifications are going to go through, and I can give some instructions to the user. If there's something special about how I want the form to be filled out, I can specify that here. And one of the more important things is how I structure my actual sign-up form. And it used to be that you had to do a certain amount of coding, a sort of a combination of HTML and something more WordPress specific called shortcode format that's used to set up the form. But I have added a form generator that simplifies that process. So the standard form asks for first name, last name. It includes a single field for phone number with a drop-down that lets people specify whether it's a work number, a home number, or a mobile number. So those three options. If I specifically wanted to get their cell number, I could specify that instead and turn off that default option. And for any of these things where I want to include a custom field, I can specify that it should be included on the guest form or not. So for meal, and this is explained up top here, if you want something as a radio button where there's several options, you can do something like meal, steak, chicken. I have to learn how to spell vegetarian. And I'll say that I want that to be included both on the form for the person who is filling out the RSVP and for their guests. And actually, we can also have forms that don't include guest sign up. So when you signed up for this Hangout, it didn't really make sense to ask about guests because it's not a physical event. I'm really collecting emails of people who I can send a reminder to saying that the Hangout is starting at a certain time. So I can either include or not include guest blanks, but obviously here I want them included. Notes is a free form field where they can enter whatever. They can enter a note to you, or you can say in the instructions that you want them to put in the name of their potluck dish for the potluck dinner you're organizing. So you can customize this to a fair degree. If you happen to be a coder, there are some additional customizations you can make at the code level. And that is documented on the rsvpmaker.com website. And then down the bottom here is where it specifies dinner 100, dinner plus reception 150. And there are a couple of different ways that this can be displayed. Basically, this is the new way, is what I just showed you. And then there's the old way, which, well, why don't we show that to you quickly? So the way this used to work, and can still work if this is preferable for the way you're using it, is people would specify, I want so many tickets basically for the dinner, or this might be something like so many people at the adult price and a few others at the child price. So that is still supported, but I think what most users seem to want is a simpler way to sign up everybody at the same price level and just have the software count up the number of guests plus the host and use that as the multiplier times the price. So that's the default now. And also, to just show quickly, If I go back to this format and I change this so that I only have one price, so now instead of that drop-down list, we'll just see that dinner is $100 per person, and it's going to ask me to just fill out my information. Let's see. And one thing I didn't show you there either was the way the confirmation messages work. So in this case, I'm both the organizer and the person who signed up. But the person who signed up gets something saying confirming your RSVP yes, and it shows the details and it shows me the link where I can go to update my RSVP. Okay, so we have the opportunity to go back later and add more guests, change this in other ways, change our meal choice, whatever. And this, by the way, is the WordPress for Toastmasters, which I mentioned earlier. Again, it's basically a customization of RSVPMaker where you sign up for specific roles. So that's also available as a separate add-on plugin that I'm still elaborating on. But it uses RSVPMaker is the basic thing that allows you to display a calendar. So you know, one of the core reasons you do this in the first place is to try and take WordPress, which was originally a blogging platform. And when you blog, you typically are advertising or promoting things on the order of what was most recently posted. But with events, what you really want to see even more is what are the events that are coming up this week, this month. So it's forward-looking as opposed to reverse chronological order. So you can use the two things in combination. You can post to the blog, we're organizing this conference that's going to be several months from now, which people wouldn't necessarily see as the next thing coming up. So you do that as a promotional thing. And there's even a way of embedding the calendar listing inside a blog post. I'll show you that in a minute. But then you also use the calendar to show people what's coming up in the immediate future. So to illustrate this more from the beginning, I did want to go through the process of adding RSVPMaker to a brand new WordPress site. Glancing back here a moment, Scott has a comment, not a question. Demo you're showing so small and fuzzy, it cannot be seen. Yeah, I mean, I can magnify these things somewhat. I mean, some of this is just dependent on the resolution of your screen, my screen, the quality of your internet connection. I'll try and make things as large and readable as I can. All right, let's go back here. So again, this is the site that I use for testing, and I have reset this to kind of its default state as if it was a brand new site. I won't go through how to install the software, but right now it's not activated. So I have all sorts of software installed here. If we activate RSVPMaker, you'll see there's now an RSVP events menu that's been created here. And one of the things that appears right at the top is this notice saying RSVPMaker needs you to create a page where the calendar listing is going to go. You can ignore the warning, or you can go ahead and create that page. And I'll let it do it. What it's going to do is it's just going to insert the default placeholder on a page called calendar. And if we go into edit this, we see this little placeholder thing. This is sort of under the covers, is what's called a WordPress shortcode. But what I've tried to do is make it simpler for people to do customizations without dealing with them on the coding level. So what you can do is you can double click on this and you get a little pop-up editor. And it basically asks you a series of questions about how you want the calendar or the events listing to be displayed. The first question is whether we're going to include a calendar on this page, as in the actual grid format calendar. We can either have links to next month, previous month at the top or the bottom. I think there actually should be an option for both showing there, but I'll have to customize that some more. We can show the number of events that are going to be listed on the page. You can have a custom message that's displayed if there are no events currently. Something like, well, we're working on it. We'll have more real soon. I guess I can show you that. Since there are no events in the system yet. It's possible to have event types or categories where we would specify that we want to show only the featured events in a particular listing. So on the rsvpmaker.com homepage, there are certain featured events that are shown in the demo section. And so I have to try and distinguish those between any actual events that I'm holding. It's a little bit of a challenge. And typically we want to show upcoming events. It is also possible to create a listing that would be your past events, looking backwards. And pick one I'll explain a little bit later. That's where we might want to embed a single event, say in a blog post. So anyways, I'm going to just say OK here. It's going to default to a listing with 10 events per page. I'll update this. If all goes well, when I go out here, I'll see a calendar grid. Since there are no events in the system right now, it just says more events coming soon. So now let's create a basic event. We can either do this from the menu up top, or we can go back to our administrator's dashboard, and there all our options related to events are listed under this RSVP events menu. We go to add new. And we go down to set the date. It's defaulting to today. There aren't too many times where you're going to be advertising a same day event, but we can count forward. And put in one for the 28th. And here's where we would specify that we want to collect RSVPs. So all the options related to RSVPs are not shown unless we check this. One way I have tried to clean up this screen a little bit. And if we went forward from here, we would get basically kind of our default event setup. Okay. So RSVP now, yes, no, first name, last name, email, phone number, work with the drop down, and an opportunity to add guests. Okay. And that, by the way, is how you would add more guests to the list if you have a bunch of them. So if we go back and edit this some more, it is also possible to add more dates to a single event. And this can cause some confusion because I have another function that you would use for a series of independent events. So where the idea here was that if you had an event that, say, went for 2 or 3 days, the example I always use is in the context of Cub Scouts, a Cub Scout camping trip. So it's going to go over the weekend. I'm not sure if those are actually weekend dates, but we'll list it that way for right now. And actually for a camping trip, I might actually say that I don't want the times to show up at the top, because we're going to publish a more detailed schedule in the body of the post. So this will give us a single event with 3 dates associated with it. So we would see them here, and then if we went to our calendar page, we would see that it shows up for each of these events, each of these dates. Okay. But if we click on it, we get taken to the same event. The other concept is to have some kind of recurring event. And this is where you create a template. So for example, this is used heavily in the WordPress for Toastmasters setup, where the clubs typically meet on a weekly or a couple times a month basis. So if I want to create a new template, what I do is say something like Friday Coffee Club. In my location, who to contact if you have questions. And this is one that meets every Friday at what? 10 a.m. might be a good time for a coffee club if people can meet during the day. And we might or might not want to collect RSVPs for this. So if I publish that, it comes back and it gives me a projection of all the Fridays. And it is possible to set one up that is just schedule varies, and you would put in the dates manually. But if you have something like a group that meets every Friday, this is pretty handy. So we add update from template, and it cranks out all these events. And then we could go individually. So if it's an event where we have in speakers, we would go edit the individual event and put in the name and the picture of our cool speaker for this week. Okay. And so the point is that these things appear independently on the calendar. If there are RSVPs, those RSVPs are tracked separately, as opposed to a date, a single event that spans multiple dates, where we either sign up for the weekend camping trip or we don't. We could go into the RSVP form and put in a deadline of when people have to sign up before it's too late. So we wouldn't, if it's a Friday through Sunday camping trip, we don't want them signing up on Sunday. We want them signing up, maybe Thursday at the latest. So there are a few options like that where you can control how some of these things are set up. Let's see. I go back one more time and look for questions. I see none. I'm going to keep talking. Let's see. Okay. Let's go through important options for the settings setup for one of these sites. So as administrator, we would go into Settings, RSVPMaker, and there are all sorts of options that we can fill in here. Again, this has kind of grown over time, so maybe there's actually a few too many options, but if 99% of the time you want to collect RSVPs, you can have that turned on but by default for every new event you create. Of course, you can still turn it off. Same with a bunch of these other options, whether we want to show the download to your calendar icons or not. You can turn that on or off. So, and then again, the form, we can change what our default form ought to look like. From the default that comes with the software, you can set your own default. And this is the coding that adds the colors for the RSVP Now button. So if you know CSS web coding, you can alter that as you need to. Date format. So whether you use, particularly if you're outside of the US, you may be using a different date format than the default that I have specified. AM, PM, and whether you include the time zone in the time format output. And then here we come to the PayPal setup. Now this is something that used to require more manual configuration. What I have now is, again, a little wizard that asks for 3 credentials that PayPal will provide you with. And there's actually a more detailed walkthrough of this on the rsvpmaker.com website. Let's see. Essentially, if you dig down far enough through the menus on the PayPal site, you will find a screen for the PayPal credentials. This is what's called your API credentials, so application programming interface, to be able to send payment requests to the PayPal site, specify what the pricing should be, and then people can go in and either pay with their PayPal account or with their credit card. So obviously these are not my actual security credentials, but what I would do is I would copy each of those things in turn, and I'm not going to go back and even worry about what these would be. But what it's going to do is it's going to create a file on the system with a random file name, trying to make this as obscure as possible to keep the hackers away from it. It is also formatted in such a way that if somebody browsed to that address and somehow found that file, they would not get any information from it. So it is reasonably secure. There are some recommendations I have posted to the site for how you might make it more secure. Now, of course, those are fake credentials, so this would not actually work if I tried to pay with those security credentials. However, once those credentials are in the system, then on the form, the pricing options start to appear. So if we don't put in any price here, it's not going to try and charge people for our event. But if we put in $10, then that becomes the price that will be shown on the event form. Let's see. A couple of other things on the settings screen. Actually, an important one to mention is that when you set up a brand new WordPress site, it defaults to UTC 0, which in other words, London. So if you're not in London, you need to change this setting. And you can scan through here. It's an awfully long list, but if you find the America section, you can scroll down to a city in your time zone, such as New York for Eastern time, and save that setting. And remember, we're talking about scheduling things so that if the time zone is not accurate, then an event may be shown as being in the past when it is actually still in the future. So that would not be a good thing. Also, all this reminder functionality that I've been working on building into the website will not work properly if your website does not know what time it is. So that needs to be set. Another thing that I do recommend is you can put in the name of an email account and a server, username and password for an account on your web server or another email account. It actually tends to work a little bit better if it's on your web server. I typically use just an SMTP plain vanilla email account set up on the same web server that the website is running on. It is possible to use Gmail, but Google has made that a little bit more complicated recently. There's a service called SendGrid that you might consider using, particularly if you're doing some kind of high volume application where you're going to have a large number of messages being sent. It might be good to go through SendGrid's email integration. So if you set that up, that will help with email delivery. If you don't have it set up, there is a default PHP mail function that will be used that also should work, but it might be a little bit more likely that the confirmation messages are going to go to spam, which you don't want. All right, so email setup. Let's see, I've covered a lot of the things that I wanted to cover. Let me glance back one more time to see if there are questions. Okay, Scott's still having trouble seeing the screen. I don't know if others are. I have a question regarding start and end dates of regular recurring club. They sort of kind of meeting dates, even though I will be, he's asking in the context of Toastmasters, even though I'll be club president for a specific fiscal year, is it possible to end the club meeting 10 years from now? Well, when you generate a series of events based on the template, it does not continue to infinity. Usually you project it out several months in advance, but you need to go back and refresh that from time to time, and so your successor will have plenty of time to figure out how that might be changed, if I understand your question right. There's one other thing I want to cover, which is basically how I organized this Hangout. In order for you to invite people into a Google Hangout, you need to explain a little bit about the setup. It's great that Google offers this free service, but there are some complications, like you need a Google Plus account to be a full participant. You can also watch it on YouTube. So you might want to explain all that stuff. And you might want to send people both a confirmation message that explains those details and a reminder message a couple of hours before the event starts. So if you got a confirmation message, as you should, or a reminder message. Let's see if I can find. Let's see. I'll be able to find my reminder message for this event. So if you signed up on the website, you should have gotten a reminder message like this that explains something about the logistics, the event details, actually includes a little snapshot of the meeting, a listing, and an option to RSVP, update your RSVP if you are not going to be able to show up after all. So how do we set that up? And we'll go back to one of these sample events, and actually the easiest way to look it up is down here. We're under confirmation message. There's a couple of links here that talk about RSVP reminders and Hangout setup. So this is going to take me to a specific screen for that listing. So the default confirmation message is just thank you. It's reasonably safe, but we may want to elaborate on that. And if what we are doing is a Hangout, when you create one of these Hangouts on-air sessions, Google provides you with a couple of different web page URLs. One for the Google Plus events page and one for the YouTube page. So what you can do is you can copy and paste those two addresses and put them in here. Again, I'm just going to fake this. So what this does is it alters the base confirmation message to say this, to give those two addresses. And so this is just a little thing to speed up your setup. So you may want to customize this to a fair degree. You can do whatever you want with it. Again, you could include images, although sometimes, since this is something that's going to go out by email, the images may or may not show up. So you want to make sure that you have a clear explanation of how people would come into your Hangout. And this is set up specifically for Hangouts, but if you were doing some other kind of webinar and wanted to register people through RSVPMaker, you could do something very similar here. You could do this manually rather than using that little Hangouts setup tool. For example, blab.im is another one that a bunch of my social media friends are experimenting with currently. So we can save this. And actually, one of the things that prompts me to do is, do I also want to add a reminder? So this is taking the same content and giving me an opportunity to create a reminder to go out 2 hours before. So I can save that. And now we'll have a reminder in the system. Scroll down, way down here to see it. So previously set reminders. This is to go out 2 hours before the event. We could create another reminder, or we could create a follow-up message to go out a little bit after the event. So the reminder message might be, thank you for attending my great webinar. Here's the address where you can download the white paper or the or sign up for the super special prize that we're giving out to people who attended our webinar. Magnify that a little bit more so we can see it. So this is going to be a reminder message for 2 hours after the event starts. We might want to give it a little bit longer than that. How long does our event go? Or maybe we actually want to make it something that's going to go out the next day. So again, it picks up, in the case of a Hangout, it's going to pick up that web address that we put in earlier for YouTube and say, here's where you go to get the replay. But the reminder message can include whatever content you want people to receive after the event. Some Toastmaster. I'm getting all tongue-tied here. Let's see. Those are the major things I wanted to cover. There was one other thing I wanted to show you. It's just my follow-up information. So here are a number of ways that you can connect with me, stay connected with the RSVPMaker project. So of course it's rsvpmaker.com. The software is available on the wordpress.org repository. Look me up at Car Communications Inc. I'm going to send you all this information, but just to give you an idea of places to connect. And people who are watching the replay maybe can be scribbling some of this down. I do have a blog on Forbes. I have the book Social Collaboration for Dummies. On Twitter, I'm David F. Carr. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. And on Facebook, CarCom is my business page. So I hope you stay in touch. I hope I answered some questions, and the replay will be available. Share it with anybody who you think might find it useful. That's all for tonight. Thanks very much for tuning in.